Faive. I work at the University of Prince Edward Island, which is on unceded Mi'kmaq territory. And today I'm going to do a little blurb about Drupal views. Drupal views have been around since about Drupal 5. They're one of the really exciting and powerful things that you can do with the Drupal CMS. But it can also be a little bit daunting if you're a new user and haven't encountered the interface before. So I have a short outline. We're going to introduce views by way of a few examples of views that you might have seen before, point you to some amazing existing documentation. I'll do a live demo where we're going to make a view for managing Islandora objects in the Islandora sandbox. And then I'll point you out in the direction of some more advanced and cool things that you can also do with views. So at their core, a view is just a way to list content and display it either to your users or to your site builders in a way that makes sense to them and allows them to do the kinds of things they might want to do. Some of the views that you might have already encountered, if you've logged into a Drupal site and you've gone to manage the content, that list of content is a view. The one thing that you will see a lot of in your Drupal sites that is not a view is the rendering of a content entity itself. So on the right-hand side, that beautiful picture of a cat with green eyes, that's a rendering of a Drupal node or an Islandora item. And while some parts of it are generated by views, that whole thing where it would say at the top the name of this object, member of, cat pictures, and all the stuff down here, the date created, the other fields, that's not a view. That's just the node. It might be rendered using a certain view mode or display mode, but that's important not to confuse view modes with capital V Drupal views. So some more views that you're going to find are if you go to the page for any taxonomy term. This is an image of the taxonomy term cats, and it shows a view or a listing of all the content in the site that has to do with cats that have been tagged with that term. A view includes the collection members listing. So on the sandbox, this is the beautiful like square grid view of items in this collection. That's a view that is placed on this page using the contexts management tool, and it uses a contextual filter to say, I'm going to show the members of the collection cats because this block is placed on the page for that collection. Views also are what we use to generate IIIF manifests, and those are what allows you to see an entire book at one time in an OpenSeaDragon viewer. So here on the right-hand side, it shows you can, I made that little thumbnail strip along the bottom show up just so that it didn't look like a single image was here. That's a configuration option in your OpenSeaDragon configuration, but it doesn't normally show up on the sandbox. But when you're on node 20, which is this book, this piece of paged content called Christian Martyrdom, if you put /manifest after it, then you get to see this beautiful rendered JSON. And that is what is used by the OpenSeaDragon viewer to understand that this is going to be a book and it's got all these pages, which are shown up here at the bottom. And the final example of views that you're going to encounter when you're using Islandora are EVAs, or entity view attachments. So this is a contrib module that we make use of. And the way that it works is it kind of generates a pseudo field. On the left-hand side is the manage display for Islandora objects. And you can see highlighted in red, the media EVA service file is presenting itself there just underneath the title, the identifier, the alternative title, the identifier, and the links. And this is what causes this block to render here with the actual service file image, which is stored in a media, which is attached to this node, but it's appearing now on the node. And to do that, we use EVAs. It's a little bit complicated, but that's one of the really sweet things that we've been able to do with views. So there's already a ton of great documentation out there. And I want to point you to Melissa Inez's amazing views videos. These are all on YouTube. She goes through making like that collection listing view, more cat views, shows you how to filter by taxonomy terms, add relationships to content and filter on that. How to use views bulk edit, which is a really powerful thing that lets you, use views as a way to select some content and then perform some batch operations on them, such as batch deleting content or changing field values or doing other things with it, like generating derivatives and things like that. And finally, exporting and importing a view. There's always been a way to share your views with other Drupal sites. If you were doing this in Islandora 7, you might remember that exporting a view is possible from the manage structure views interface, like right there when you're in the list of the views. That's no longer the case because in Drupal 8 and 9, views are just configuration items. And so you manage that in the normal configuration synchronization area where you can import or export any other config objects, including views. Finally, because everything that we're talking about here is, well, just about everything we're talking about here is already built into Drupal. Like most of this was not, is not code that's written by Islandora people for use with Islandora. This is stuff that's managed by the Drupal community. So the Drupal documentation for views includes tons of great information and all of it can apply. The caveat is that since they moved their documentation thing over a few years ago, the organization really took a hit. And so if you go to that page, the listing on the right-hand side is not in any useful order and will possibly cause you more confusion if you aren't familiar with views already. That said, this stuff is stuff that you can Google, you can use Stack Overflow. The Drupal views like basic core concept and even the interface hasn't changed that much over the last few iterations of Drupal. So a lot of community information that you find is going to still be relevant. All right. Here is the scary moment we've all been waiting for. Oh, I forgot to start my timer. Okay. So we're going to do a live demo on future.islandora.ca. And my thoughts were that when I go to the content page here, I can see all the content that's on the site, but like some of it isn't what I would consider Islandora content. So I want to make a management page for just Islandora stuff. And because, as I mentioned earlier, that content listing is a view, I can go to manage structure and views and find this view here. So it's called content, its machine name is content, and it is displaying as a page at /admin/content. Now with the drop-down link beside it, I can choose to duplicate this view. And I'll give it a name, Islandora content demo. All right, so this is the, I guess, I don't know, we called it, in Islandora 7, we called the XML form builder the spaceship because it was the most complicated and powerful tool that we had in our arsenal. This feels a little bit more like, I don't know, an airplane cockpit to me. It has tons of amazing configuration and controls. Most of them you're not going to need to use too much. So on this block, which kind of has 3 columns, the right-hand column for advanced stuff usually comes collapsed. Below it is a preview of what this view is going to look like. So you can see this table that's generated with a bunch of fields, including title, content type, author status. All this stuff is configured in the left-hand column of the view config. So we're displaying this view as a table, and the fields include title, content type, username, etc. Since this is going to be an Islandora only view, I'm going to add a new filter criteria. So I'm going to filter by the way that we define what is in our repository and what isn't. In this case, in the sandbox, I'm going to say if the content type is repository item, then it's in the repository. But the other two, article and basic page, are not.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I can start typing, and there's tons of different fields here and things that you can filter on. Content type is one of them. So I'll configure this to be equal to one of repository item. And now I can look at my preview and see that that basic page, which had been at the bottom of the list, is no longer there. Great. So if I try to save this view, because it's a node, because it's a page, here it's showing that it's displaying as a page. This middle column is showing me some page settings, and it is putting it at admin content node. And I don't think that's going to work because there's already a view there. That's not working. So we change it to admin content Islandora. And another thing with this views interface is that you can do a lot of changes in it, but they're not saved until you press the save button at the bottom. Really important, really easy to forget that and be like, why isn't my stuff working? The preview pane down below will show you an update, but if you're trying to navigate to your actual page, it won't. All right, well, that's not working. And it's quite possible that it's because it's not in the right menu. Just give me a second. The choice of live demoing. All right, there we go. So I've momentarily removed the idea of having this page in the menu, and we'll get to that later. But now I can see my new content view, which is showing me just Islandora items, but it's not showing me stuff that I want to see. You know, properties of my Islandora objects are like, what model is it? And is it member of a collection? So I'm going to add those two pretty quickly here under fields. I'm going to use member of. And I'm going to add model. So here in the preview pane, if I scroll down, I can see that all these pages.jpegs are members of Christian Martyrdom. A few down, I can see those cats and dog pictures that are members of the collection's cats and dog pictures. And I can also see what models they are: image, collection, page, content. Now, when I am looking at this, you know, I'm seeing that repository item is here. It's not highlighted, but page is. And if I were to, you know, click on that, I'm not sure, like, why is that a link? Well, it's that page is a taxonomy term. And so that link took me to the page for page, listing all the pages in our repo. And that's interesting, but I don't really like that. So I'm going to go back up to the field here in the view where I added it. That's field model. And there's a checkbox for link label to the referenced entity. I can unclick that. I can actually do an awful lot more here of customizing how this is going to display. I can rewrite the results and combine it with other field values. I can make it a link to something else entirely. But for right now, I'm just going to have it display as plain text. So there. Now the model is not showing up as a link anymore, just because I found that to be a little bit distracting. I could also, because I only have one content type that's showing up in this view, I could save some space and take out that content type column. So clicking on content type brings up this little modal, and at the bottom is just remove, and thus it's gone. So that's cool. I'm going to click save so that I can see this over at at admin content Islandora. And there we go. Now, I had mentioned the menu, right? If I click on manage content, I can see content, comments, files, and media as my options. And it's actually really easy to stick my own view in that menu. And that's this menu thing that I was talking about before. So right now we have it set to no menu, but if I make it a menu tab, it turns out that's what those other tabs are. And I'm going to call it something. I'll call it Islandora content and click apply. And if I save this view, then suddenly when I go to content, just like manage content, I see my Islandora content appearing as a tab here beside the main content view. So this is great. This is going to allow me to manage my Islandora content, feel like, as a repository admin, I can come in here and do a little bit more stuff with these objects. Problem is, I don't have any filters that would filter on things that I might want to use. For instance, I might want to filter by model or filter by what it's a member of. So I can actually do that really easily. Back here under filter criteria, I'm going to add a filter and I'm going to make these exposed filters. So model is there, and I can even I can add multiple at the same time. So member of. And to make it an exposed filter, I just have to check off that box. And now field member of, you can take out the machine name if you like. It shows up a little bit nicer. And this one is for field model. It's not as exposed as that. I have to choose. First, I want to use vocabulary from field models. I know it should already know that field only has this vocabulary, but it's not as connected as it should be. So I'm going to have Islandora models as the vocabulary that the user can use to select it. And I want to choose a dropdown so that it's like the other filters for content type and stuff. So I'll expose it and I will let the user choose from these terms. If you wanted, you could allow multiple selections or have it remember the last selection they had. I'm not going to do that for this. So down here, we have all of our objects. The filters are spilling over onto two lines, which isn't great, but you do what you do if you want to CSS that after or something. So I can say just show me the images, and it just shows me the images, or just show me paged content. There's just the one paged content. If we go back to showing all and say member of, if I want dog pictures, if I type in dog here, we get nothing. Or if I type in dog pictures, we still get nothing. And the reason for that is that this is doing an SQL query in a sense. And the only thing that it knows right now about that thing in the member of field is its ID, is the taxonomy term's ID. So if I put 16 in the member of field, then I get the dog pictures. Interesting, but not very useful. So there's a way around this, and that's where you use relationships. So under the advanced tab on the right is relationships underneath contextual filters. And there's already one relationship set up, and that is author. If we scroll down and see why that is, it's because the author is showing up as admin. If we didn't have that relationship, it would just show up as the number 1, which is the user ID of the author user. Why then do I get to see the word dog pictures and not the number 16? Well, there's a views plugin for taxonomy terms that is able to render it in a smart way, like we'd want to see it, and even link to that referenced entity. But in order for us to do a filter on dog pictures as dog pictures, we're going to use this relationship that is member of. Okay, and there are two. So the reason there are two is that the object in the row could either be member of something else, or it could have things that are member of it. And the first one, the content referenced from this object's field member of, is what we want. The other one, where the description is relate each content where the field member of is set to this content item, would be a way to link in any like children of this object. It's not what we want the top one. And sometimes you have to, make a best guess. So do we want to require this relationship? I'm going to say no, because I want to see all my content, regardless of whether it's in a collection or a paged content or not. So I'll click apply. And now it is showing underneath relationships. And the cool thing is that when I now go to add a filter, if I wanted to, I'm going to filter by the title of the thing that it's a member of. So I'll go to title, and title under category content. Now here, because I've configured that relationship already, I can choose to use not the content that is in the row, but the content that is related by field member of. And I'm going to expose that to anyone to allow them to change it. If I left the operator as equal to, then you'd have to type dog pictures exactly as it was. So I'm just going to put contains and then hit apply. And now we have a exposed filter called title, which if I type in dog and click filter, but clear out the filter, the member of there, it also shows me the dog. If I go to cat for cat pictures, it will show me all the cat pictures. So having title here and also title for the main title feature isn't useful. I can change that in how this is going to show, in the filter criteria for this content title member of. And to be clean, I'm going to delete the old member of filter, which had to use the numbers because I didn't like that. All right. So we can save the view. And now we've got something that I think I'd be pretty happy using as a Islandora management interface. I can filter by models. I can filter by what they're members of. And then using these checkboxes on the right-hand side, I can do some batch operations. So this is that views bulk edit tool, which is generally how in Islandora we're doing all of our batch operations. And these are ones that are all automatically available. I think there are extra modules and things that you can get to add additional options, to add additional actions that you might want to do to objects. Okay, so that was kind of a whirlwind presentation of something that I think could be really useful to people looking to manage their Islandora content. So what I have done is I went to configuration and configuration synchronization and export, single item, select configuration type view and configuration name Islandora demo. And this blob of YAML is available in this GitHub gist, which is in the slides, which I have sent by email. Let me know if you need me to send a link to a Google thing or if you can host that. Views aren't completely perfect. There's a lot of stuff that you can do, but you do need to be careful that your results are what you want. So one thing that I had tried to do earlier and thought, oh, this would be a great idea for this, management view, is I want to see thumbnails of my Islandora objects, if they have thumbnails. If they don't, I still want to see them. But the way that you would do that would be to add a relationship to a media. So since I think I talk fast and I think I might have a few minutes, you know what? I don't have that much time. Okay. If I were to add that, the relationship to media, what I'd end up with is, instead of a listing of like each node, one row per node, is that I would have potentially 4 times or 5 times as many rows in this content view, because each media that is a member of would create a new row. If you wanted to only show the ones that were thumbnails, then you'd end up filtering out any content items that don't have thumbnails. And that's not a very useful feature for your view to have. Actually, so one more thing that I'm going to go through, because I think it's really important and is probably a best practice. In my opinion, it's a best practice, especially in management views, is to add the view results counter to show that, like, on this page, I'm giving you numbers 1 to 50 of 781 objects found in this view. That just allows you to have a lot more faith in what the view is showing you and understand, when you're saying, I want to do this batch operation, are you just doing it to the items that you see in that list, because it could be paged, or are you doing it to everything? So back in our Islandora content demo, this can often be done by putting something in the header. And one of the options is usually results summary. So displaying start to end of total, and these are the replacement tokens that you can use. The default is fine. And here's, we're displaying 1 to 33 of 33. So this is showing me everything that I've got. Okay, so I had my caveats. If you're using views, like, you can do a lot of stuff, just it takes a while to learn. I spent years doing this. In most of one of my first Islandora projects was learning about all the in-depth ways that you could use views, that you can use contextual filters, and other really cool stuff. I mentioned the thing about thumbnails. That can be solved in a number of ways. The second thing is views can be exported and imported as a whole view. So when I said that this view is showing up as a page, you can actually kind of like have multiple versions of a view if you like. By creating other displays, like whether that's a page or a block, you can tweak different things about that. So you can show kind of different versions. You don't need to go in and create a whole new view to do this. One of the, for instance, under structure views, I decided as an Islandora manager, I want to manage my Islandora content, which are the nodes, but I also want to manage my Islandora media. So I made I went to the built-in media view and I added a secondary page, Islandora media. Right now I have it as disabled, so I'll enable that and save it. And now when I go to, managing my content, the same way that this Islandora content tab can appear, I can make an Islandora media tab appear. And in this view, I have all the kind of what we used to call data streams, but we now call media of, and they're grouped by their parent media, parent Islandora node. At the top is the one thing that exists in this repository that is not a member of or a media of something else. So I wasn't sure exactly in this case, how do you want to define what is an Islandora media versus a generic media? If you have images or other things that you're adding to your site that you're just using as, banner images, or, ways to, present content on basic pages or on articles that you don't necessarily consider part of your repository, you're going to have to come up with a way, if you want to, of distinguishing those media from the media that are Islandora. Here, I didn't, what I thought we could do was use that relationship, that it needs to be a member of a node for it to be, or media of a node for it to be an Islandora media. But the case where something might kind of fall out because somebody might have deleted that field value, means that I want to be able to kind of catch those orphaned media and fix them if I need to. And that's the one at the top that I have, where this thumbnail image used to actually be a thumbnail of a collection. And don't worry, I'll replace it back. Actually, at 9:30 tonight, it'll probably reset itself back to the way that it was before. Right, the reason that I wanted to show this is because these are two different displays of the same view, where some of the features are slightly different just on this display. So if I wanted to, change how something showed up, anytime you have one of these modal windows, there's often a drop down that says, do you want to do the change for all of the displays or just for this page? And you'd use just for this page. That's one of the other amazing things that you can do with views, is make like different versions of them. And, they can show up at different paths. They can show up as different blocks, depending on how you have it that you're placing that view somewhere. And the drawback with that is that if I wanted to share what I've done here, this Islandora media version with you, if I go to configuration and try to export this config, it's going to come as the entire media view. And so you probably already have a built-in entire media view, and this is going to have to override that. If you've made changes to yours, they would be overridden by installing this. So be careful if you want to make something that you can share with other people, that it's done in a way that is not going to clobber over stuff that they might already be interested in modifying by themselves. However, this is really useful if you are going from like dev, staging, prod, and you want to do some tweaks. You want to play with the view. Oh, I wonder if I can do this. If it works, then yes, you're going to go to that config sync and take that view config and plunk it up in the production server. All right. Unless you're using views bulk operations, like views is probably not going to break your site. It might break a view. You might have like a white screen or a timeout. Some of the problems might be that if you've just imported somebody else's view, you might not have all the things that are necessary for that view to work. You might not have the fields that are displayed. You might not have the plugins that are being used. Or you might be doing a query that is really complicated and takes a lot of memory. To account for that, you can do some debugging and see kind of what's the SQL going on underneath there. If you go to structure views settings, just like the alternate tab on that list of views, there's a way to show kind of both the performance characteristics and the actual SQL that's being executed. But the other thing that you can use for that is caching. So if you have a hefty view, hopefully it'll only need to be computed once, and then Drupal will remember the contents of that view and be able to display it to other things. A warning with caching is that if you're also using different filter values, especially exposed filters, you need to make sure that you're not clobbering over the different ways that it's supposed to change, that you want it to do a new query. So just make sure that your caching is aware of that. Here I have a few other things that are really powerful and I think make views really exciting. I went over rewriting just a very little bit, but Views has a super powerful rewriting engine. You can combine fields together. You can make them link to anywhere you like by and one of the cool things that you can do is make the view display a field, but don't actually display it, say hide from display. And then you can use that value in another field if you want to combine them. And views field view is like my favorite views extension module, because it allows you to nest one view inside the row of another view. And so that's something that you actually could use in order to make that thumbnail show up that I had talked about, where it won't, only show things with thumbnails, but it'll show the thumbnail if there is one, and it'll show nothing if there isn't. All right.
The export metadata view, I'm just gonna backtrack a second. And I have two displays on it, one for repository items, which is one content type we have, and one for collection items, which is another content type. Most folks who just have Islandora objects will just only need one of these. And so what the views data export gives you is this export format here. So now I'm able to do a data export. And when I adjust the settings for it, I can pick CSV file, and I can pick all these other things, but I was really only interested in CSV. And from here, I put in all the fields I'm interested in. There's one caveat here. I am using a Solr search thing to do this. So this isn't coming directly from Drupal's database. This is coming from Solr. And if you do that, there's a couple of caveats, meaning you can't add relationships. I found that out the hard way. So it's kind of what you see is what you get. You can do some stuff with it. It's just not the same experience as if you're using Drupal's database directly. Still very, very handy. So I'm exporting all this stuff from our repository items. I have a couple of filter criteria. Basically, I wanted to export data from a search results, which is why I ended up using Solr. So I have full text search here. And then a content data source, I'm saying repository items. And then I have a couple of other things in here. Or I'm filtering on repository items, and then I sort them based on this stuff. One of the other key things is how do you get to this particular view? And I have that set up here. So if you navigate to our server, our domain name / export items, you can actually feed it a Solr query, depending on how you have things set up. So this is just one way to do it. I don't think you have to do the Solr part, but I'll show you what it looks like in practice. So if I go to this particular path, export items, and I have a query, there's two ways you can do this. You can do it full text search. This gets complicated, I realize, because I'm bringing in a query to it. It may be simpler if you're not using the search index to do it. But what I'm basically telling it to do here with this query is to take everything that's considered an Islandora object or my repository items and export them. So if I hit return, yeah, Katie, that was a Solr query directly. I could have just done a full text search too. What I get down here, what I get taken to in our particular setup is our search results page. So this is the search results for that particular search. This should be all my repository items. And I get this export complete up here. And if I click here, I'll actually get the file. And if I open it up, this is what it looks like. So I have all my repository items and all of their data in our particular format. This is highly formatted for our setup, so it's a bit unique to it. But you can see that all of those fields in the view that I set up are exported here. And it's a big object. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so that's the gist of working with those. Like, you don't have to do it from a Solr view, I don't believe, but that's how we chose to implement it because of our use case. I can stop there.